So, there's going to be another delay in the Sanders video. Apologies to Papa Bernie, but my cat just died. You know him, you've seen him, he's been my avatar since I started this channel. His name was Chewy, and he was a big, white, fluffy snuggle boy. Now, I know this isn't the sort of thing y'all come here for, and I'll try to keep the sappiness to a minimum as best I can, but goddammit, this is my channel, and I will make whatever videos I feel like. No one's been able to stop me so far, but, you know, I'll talk about capitalism, systemic issues later on the video. I'll be sure to stay on brand, but first, you gotta listen to my tale. So, it was Monday, and I was at work tweeting on the toilet, as you do, and my fiance called me, and, you know, so I just immediately sent it to voicemail, because, you know, I'm on the toilet, and, you know, I was just about to text her, like, I'm at work, but I didn't get the chance to, because she immediately texted me, something's wrong with Chewy. So I got up, pulled up my pants. No, I didn't wash my hands, but I didn't shit all over them, so it's fine. And immediately, you know, called my fiance back. And what she told me is that he was panting. In case you're unaware, cats don't pant unless there's something wrong. Usually it's because they're overheated or they're stressed or they like just exerted themselves a lot, but in this case, none of those things were true. Also, he made a sound that my fiance had heard before, but we'll get to that. So she rushes him off to the nearest vet hospital, and I leave work early and meet her there. And of course, me, being a giant dork who researches things for fun, obviously I looked into reasons why a cat might pant. I remember finding 3 common medical reasons. I imagine there are more, but this is what I remember. One of them was respiratory infection. Now, both my cats have been seeming kind of sluggish lately, and so I kind of actually, you know, I hoped that that's what it was, because that's easily treatable with antibiotics in most cases. Another possibility was heartworms, which are not as common in cats as they are in dogs, but they can happen. And as I understand, that is also treatable. The third one I became acquainted with a second time when I walked into the exam room to hear the vet, through tears, mind you, explain that Chewy had an enlarged ventricle in his heart. And in all likelihood, what had happened is that ventricle had started throwing blood clots all over his body, and those ended up in his lungs. And within an hour and a half of him first showing symptoms, he was lying on his side and non-responsive, even on oxygen. So obviously, we gave the go-ahead to put him down. We went and immediately took him to a spot in the woods where my friends and I have been burying our cats for 10 years now. We buried him with his favorite toy, right next to his old kitty friend Hugo, who he very much loved but died when he was only a kitten. Chewy would have been 5 in May. This was not the first cat I've had to bury, but it is by far the saddest. Before I move on, I want to note that this condition actually used to be a lot more common in cats. Before 1987, apparently it killed like 3% of cats because cat food didn't contain the necessary amino acid taurine, which is not bull semen. I remember when I was a kid, everybody said that the taurine in Red Bull was bull semen, and that's not true. It's fake news. However, it took about 6 years for cat food manufacturers to put the necessary amount of taurine in their food. So now this condition is far less frequent, and given the fact that we feed our cats relatively decent food, it's far more likely that his condition was genetic as opposed to being nutritional, though put a pin in this point about cat food lacking necessary nutrition. We'll touch on that later. The story behind the picture that I used for my avatar, which now I'm stuck using forever. I mean, I can't change it now. Anyway, the story behind it is that Chewy used to get really excited whenever we had to change the sheets. I never really understood why, but he liked to crawl around and get in the way while we're trying to like put the sheets and the blankets back on. And so eventually I just started just throwing them on top of him, and he would have to like root around to find his way out. But in this particular instance, I threw the blanket over him and it landed just like that, like half over his face, and he just froze. And so I got out my phone to take a picture, and I was like, "There's no way he's going to stay like this while I take this picture. He's going to move, but he didn't." And I it's a fucking awesome picture. Like, come on, you gotta admit that. The other avatar that I've occasionally used on Twitter is this painting that my fiance did of him, and she captured him fucking perfectly. His favorite game to play we called Chase, because it was essentially me and him and my fiance all running to different parts of the apartment and then waiting until someone ran past so that we could jump out at them. When he was little, like when he was only like a few months old, he would take his favorite toy and walk up to whoever was sitting at the couch, especially if that person was new, lay the toy right at their feet and look up at them, growl, as if to say, "I fucking dare you to take it." It is by far the most like dog behavior I've ever seen a cat exhibit. So, relevant information. My fiance has really big titties. No, I'm not going to tell you how big, you fucking creep. Get out of here. But anyway, when Chewy was little, one of his favorite places to lay was just like right on her titties. Right? Like you just circle up right there. And she fucking loved this. Of course, he did keep trying to do it well after he got too big, and he was a big boy. He got up to about 12 pounds, I believe, and he wasn't overweight or anything. He was just a big kitty. If I were like fucking around on my phone in bed, he would come and he would shove his head like under my phone and demand love. But the thing that's gonna really stick with me, the thing that I will probably never have with another cat again, is that Chewy really loved to be cradled, but only by me, only right here in this chair, and only when no one else was looking. I mean, occasionally he did do it when my fiance was in the room, but it was rare. I really wish I had a picture or a video to show you of that. I'd always intended to get it because, like I said, he kept doing it right here in this chair, and I believe it was either on Saturday or Sunday, when I was doing research or whatever, that he jumped up to be cradled, and I thought, you know what, next fucking time I get I'm sitting down, I'm editing or playing video games or researching or whatever, I'm just gonna put up my fucking camera. I'm just gonna record, and like eventually he'll do it, and then I'll just have the fucking footage, and I can use it whenever I intend to use it. In fact, I had planned on coming home that day on Monday and editing the now twice delayed Bernie video, and my fiance was going to go hang out with friends, so it would have just been me. It almost certainly would have happened. I would have got it if he hadn't died that day. I found that to be really heartbreaking. Moments like that just so clearly contrast a loved one being there and never being there again, are just really powerful. But I said that I would stay on brand. So I'm going to do that now. This is actually a subject and a story that I've kind of tossed around the idea of talking about, but I never got the fire in my belly to actually do it. One of the reasons why this moment made my fiance and I panic so much is that this is not the first emergency health scare we've had with Chewy. He almost died when he was less than a year old, and that was back when he made the aforementioned sound that my fiance heard on that fateful Monday. Back then, Chewy had just graduated to adult flea treatment. And so when we went down to Petco or PetSmart or whatever, I saw a cheaper option. Now, first off, I want to cop to my responsibility in this. As a relatively poor American, I was the one who pushed my fiancé to get the cheaper flea stuff. She wanted to, pay for Frontline or Advantage or whatever. Also, I, who once again researched things for fun, could have taken the 5 minutes necessary to look into why this stuff was so much cheaper, because I would have learned things. The cheap flea treatment in question was Sentry prescriptions, which the active ingredient in it is etofenprox. I'm like 1,000% sure I'm pronouncing that wrong, but fuck it, I don't care. Etofenprox is a pyrethroid, which is a synthetic version of a derivative of the chrysanthemum flower. Pyrethroids and their non-synthetic cousins pyrethrins are commonly used as insecticides. The thing about these chemicals, if ingested, they're mildly toxic for dogs, but they are very toxic for cats. So, as you can imagine, most companies don't put these chemicals in flea treatments for cats. Most cases of cats getting pyrethroid or pyrethrin poisoning come from, licking the fur of their recently treated pupper friends. But those companies that don't use these cheaper chemicals also charge twice as much. Now, if marketing cheaper, more toxic chemicals to poor people isn't an example of capitalist exploitation, I just don't fucking know what is. Now, I can imagine you pet owners are saying, well, if you apply the stuff properly, then they shouldn't be able to ingest it in the first place. In fact, there are like 1 million websites out there that say as long as these products are properly applied, there's very little risk. For starters, Chewy was my 4th cat, so I know the sweet spot to put flea treatment. It's right between their shoulder blades. But this Sentry prescription stuff is weirdly oily. Seriously, go to any website that sells this stuff and go through the reviews and you will find dozens of them that claim that the flea medicine just spread all over their pet's fur and left it all greasy. And this is what allowed it to spread into an area that Chewy could lick. Hey guys, so I missed a paragraph while I was recording this video, and I think it's interesting. While I was going through reviews of this product, I found that, number one, nowhere, anywhere, does it have anything even remotely approaching a positive review score. In fact, on Sentry's own website, it has a 1.4 out of 5. 72 out of the 81 reviewers gave it 1 star, and that is on their own site. If markets worked the way people claim they do, this product simply wouldn't exist. Now, like I said, Chewy is my 4th cat, and I've had cats be able to get at their stuff before. It happens sometimes. But each of those times I was using Frontline or Advantage, one of the more expensive ones. And At most, they puked. They were fine, though. So, when I saw Chewy licking it, I just kind of figured it wasn't going to be a big deal. That was until he started stumbling around as though he were drunk, puking, and yowling, much like more recent events. So again, my fiance called me, I left work, went down to the vet hospital. And long story short, he got treated and he was fine, but they did tell us to keep an eye out for any long-term neurological effects, anything popped up later in the future. So we were always kind of on edge with regards to Chewy's health, and I always kind of expected that it would be something resulting from this would be eventually what did him in. But I have no reason to think that his enlarged heart was caused by this. I just have no evidence to make that claim. So, in all likelihood, it was genetic. But my experiences with Chewy have caused me to think about something. And yes, I am going to use my grief to talk about something I think is important. When Chewy was poisoned, we were fortunate in the sense that I had just got paid. And so my entire paycheck went to his emergency care, which I believe was about $800. And just to head off anyone who wants to say, if you had been a responsible pet owner, you would have only paid $40 more instead of paying $800 more. I want to respond two ways. Number one, fuck you, poverty charges interest. And number two, this is about selling cat poison to cat owners. As a side note, I've always hated the concept of pet ownership. I've never felt like any pet I've had was my property. It's just weird to me. But to get back on track, Sentry sells cat poison for cats. They obviously have slipped under the radar well enough to make enough profit to keep selling their products and stay in business. Eventually, they're gonna kill a cat. I'm not sure what to say if you think that consumers have more responsibility in this situation than the company does. And hey, look, if you don't believe, just take my word that Sentry sells pet poison. Well, you don't have to take my word for it. When Chewy was poisoned 4 years ago, I did a deep dive of the company, and I found out that there was a class action lawsuit against them, specifically for their flea collars. I remember this because I wanted to lend, my testimony and support to any action against them, but this case was specifically about their flea collars, which I didn't use. Now, after Chewy's untimely death, I found out that there have been several lawsuits against them, though I don't know what became of the flea collars one. I couldn't find that one again. The most recent was filed by a Ramona Panicula, again, another name I'm sure I'm fucking murdering, whose dog suffered skin irritation and hair loss after using Sentry Natural Defense, a flea treatment that uses a number of essential oils. Much like how pyrethrins and pyrethroids are like known cat toxins, essential oils of pretty much all kinds are pretty much toxic for all pets. Like, just Google essential oils, pets. I think that would have been the bare minimum for the Sentry research team. Now, here's what I think about all this. If companies that make pet products are going to put out nutritionally deficient food, like they very notably did in the 80s, or put out medicines that are essentially just poison for pets like they do right now. Century Natural Defense and that Century prescription stuff are still being sold. If these companies are going to put our loved ones at risk, I think we need universal veterinary care. Also, they shouldn't fucking put our loved ones at risk. There's a lot of talk about universal health care, especially in my country, because we're about, 50 years behind the rest of the global north on this issue. But honestly, all the arguments that you can make for universal health care for humans, you can also make for universal veterinary care. It's not like I had the luxury of seeing if another vet hospital in the area charged less than $800 for the activated charcoal treatment that saved Chewy's life. My fur baby was dying. They could have charged me anything, and I, in my panic, probably would have paid it. In the same way that one may sneer at a parent who can't afford to take their kid to the doctor, we might be appalled at someone who abandons an animal, even though in all likelihood, these people aren't shirking their responsibilities out of malice, but because they can't afford it. And look, some people are cruel and lazy, but I believe that most everyone has a basic level of empathy. I dare say it's more likely that someone abandons an animal because they have to feed their kids, and they think that that animal maybe has a better chance in the wild than they do at a shelter that will just eventually kill them because they ran out of space, rather than them just being like, oh, fuck this thing, because they have no fucking feelings. I'm not denying those people exist, I'm just saying they're rare. My fiance's cousin is the current human to an adorable happy pupper named Zombie. Zombie is thus named because she was brought in as a puppy to my fiance's cousin's veterinary clinic that she worked at the time, with a necrotic umbilical hernia, which was a very expensive surgery to correct. It was about $1,500. Now, the person who brought Zombie in just said, I can't afford that, but my partner's cousin stepped up, and now Zombie is happy and healthy and likes to, smack you with her toys when she wants you to play with her. It's adorable. And this worked out for Zombie. Just think about how many zombies there are out there. How many pets each year get put down just because people can't afford to pay for it. I mean, in all likelihood, I don't know the person who brought Zombie in. I never met them. But, I think it's a pretty reasonable assumption to say that they really just couldn't afford to pay for that surgery. I know I couldn't. It's more than I make in a month. And it's a hell of a lot less expensive than keeping humans alive, seriously. On Monday, we went to that vet hospital, spent $400, and came home with a dead cat. And to be clear, I would have spent a lot more money if it meant that Chewy wouldn't have had to die choking on his own breath. Which is precisely why the supposed laws of supply and demand really don't work in this industry. Consider this a mini episode of how the profit motive fails. When you and your loved ones need something to survive, or simply not suffer, you'll pay anything, do anything, subject yourself to anything just to make sure that you and yours live to see another day. I'll admit that it plays second fiddle to universal healthcare for humans. Obviously it does. And there's a dimension that has to be considered. We wouldn't want factory farmers to abuse a system of free veterinary care to treat their animals even shittier than they already do. But that's something that we can work around. We can make sure that doesn't happen and still have universal veterinary care. But it is important to bring up. But just like it is for humans, medical care is not an optional or luxury expense. It's a necessity. I think universal healthcare for pets is something that we it might be worthwhile to talk about and put out there, and it might actually even be something good for electoral candidates to run on. I mean, the cost of pet care sounds like a hell of a kitchen table issue to me. As an aside, let me know if there are any organizations or politicians that are pushing for this, because, like, it just kind of came to me. I didn't even really look it up. And it just seems like something that flows very logically from the idea of human universal healthcare. But for real, I'd love to see people talk about this. And I think a lot of pet parents would agree. Anyway, that's all I wanted to say here about this. I'm going to miss my Chewy. This video is for him. I hope this idea catches on. And, regardless, he'll forever live on as my avatar, because now I'm stuck with it forever. Cheers, Chewy. Rest in power.